Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to share with you a playbook that should be the foundation of every company's approach to product line reviews. With that said, I'd like to introduce Peter Green.
Thank you. Good afternoon as well, and thank you for joining us. So my name is Peter Green, as you heard, and I am the head of strategic business development here at Databations. My career in insights spans over 30 years in the home improvement and durable space. During that time, I have seen the evolution of PLRs firsthand across many categories and industries, including housewares, appliances, technology, and home improvement. Each evolved as more information, market information became available. Now it is the home improvement industry's turn. Joining me today is my colleague, Phil Melson. Phil is the head of our customer success team and also has had a distinguished career in the insight space, leveraging different types of information such as POS, panel, and model data to drive high ROI for customers. Phil, too, has seen the evolution of PLRs from a different lens. His background in the fast-moving consumer goods positions him and the team to partner with our clients to drive successful outcomes every day. For today's discussion, I will be speaking to the new standards for PLRs, including retailer expectations, goals, and outcomes. This includes the role of data in the process. I will then turn it over to Phil to speak to the framework of successful PLRs, some key takeaways, and we will leave you all with a checklist for your next PLR. But before we get into it, a little about Databations. Databations is the strategic intelligence partner to the $3 trillion building materials industry. Our proprietary AI-powered platform delivers accurate store and SKU level data, enabling our clients to optimize their assortment, pricing, and inventory to grow their business. Our best-in-class tech stack allows us to ingest and process over 350 million records in over 1,000 categories and over 400,000 SKUs each and every day. Our information, unlike consumer panel-based providers, captures all sales, inclusive of pros, not just DIY. Credit card information can capture sales of pro, but not brands or items that they are purchasing. Our methodology yields such accurate results, we actually contractually guarantee it. We then serve up these insights on assortment, price, and inventory through our intelligent application built with decision-making in mind. Databations is dedicated to you, the building materials industry. And as a result, we are laser focused on the channels that matter most. Our data are derived from several key retailers across big box, retail, home improvement, hardware, and distribution channels. Below is just a list of a few key banners. The Databations team will be at the International Builders and Kitchen and Bath shows next week in Orlando, Florida. We would be happy to discuss any questions you may have from today's webinar or any questions you may have about Databations there. Feel free to reach out to me at peter@databations.ai to set a time to connect. We take our information from visibility to action. All of what Databations delivers our clients are focused on key KPIs. Our SKU level information is table stakes data for PLRs as it unlocks the ability to focus the merchant conversation on what is most important to them, growing their category sales. Databations assortment, pricing, and inventory optimization insights drive fact-based outcomes and actions. With the market dynamics as fluid as they've ever been, PLRs take on even more importance. And while preparation has always been important, with the stakes higher than ever, there is no room for error. Margin pressure has always existed, but with tariffs, the stakes are greater than ever. SKU rationalization, price changes are being scrutinized like never before. Therefore, recommendations must be based on facts and aligned to the merchant's priority. With the availability of complete category and SKU level information, the conversation must shift from brand level to specific SKU recommendations that will improve the assortment and grow the category sales at your retail partners. For years, I have seen this throughout my career. PLRs were about advancing a brand's sales, regardless if it was right for the retailer. In absence of data, this is an understandable approach, but not necessarily correct. Now, with the level of data available from macro to micro, A successful PLR will be formulated based on outcomes beneficial to the retailer. This is how a company becomes a trusted advisor. In the past, when only macro industry category and brand level information was available, PLRs focused on historical performance, directional insights, and my favorite, gut feel. They also focused around brand-centric narrative. What our clients tell us today is, and what we all know, is that retailers don't need more data. They need fact-based recommendations that cut through the noise. We have already talked about preparation. That certainly has not changed. First and foremost, you must be prepared for today's PLRs. Objectivity is one change, right? Yes, of course, you want your brand to benefit, but being objective and leading with the facts will be more effective. Lead with retailer first recommendations and outcomes. And lastly, of course, is simplicity. Your merchants don't care about what you call a new product feature. They care about how it benefits their category sales. Speak to them in their language, not you. The role of data is extremely important and very simple. Throughout my career in the data space, I've always told clients, if the information cannot help you make money, save money, or mitigate risk, you don't need it. In the PLR process, it does all three. It will help your merchants justify their decisions that will make money. It will help you identify slower moving SKUs in the total assortment, including your own, to discontinue, saving you money. Lastly, by being data-driven in your PLRs, you will mitigate your risk and your retailing risk by being grounded in the accurate assortment, pricing, and inventory information. As I conclude my section today, I want to close by reiterating that the best practices for PLRs are those that paint the picture of what is happening, starting with the market level and macro dynamics, layered with retailer performance, both in isolation and through a competitive lens, all focused on the goal of connecting those macro forces with granular SKU level insights to identify assortment enhancements that drive business results. I will now turn it over to Phil, who will bring our PLR playbook to life based on real life examples. Phil?
Thank you, Peter. As Peter mentioned at the outset, my name is Phil Nelson. I lead our customer success team here at Databations, and really our focus in partnering with our clients is driving ROI through business outcomes. And we know that the PLR really is the intersection of your business, your retailer's business, and that's where the outcomes are generated. And in talking with our clients over the years, we really have encountered really three areas of basic challenge with PLR preparation. The first is the supplier being able to find their voice. So it's difficult sometimes to bring a unique perspective to the merchants using only the direct data from the retailer. The merchant is very accustomed to the data. They know it in and out. And so there's lenses there that may not be apparent in the basis of really finding that unique voice, finding that unique angle. The next is overcoming inertia. So as a PLR is scheduled and is coming up fast, it's hard to know exactly how to start, where to focus, who to recruit from your team to get the right storyline and outcome and really get the machine moving. And then finally, discerning signal versus noise. Tremendous amount of content that you'll have access to in the process or that you'll be given. How do you funnel those into specific SKU level recommendations for the merchant that tie the storylines of your brand to the goals of the merchant? And so through those conversations and thinking about how to partner and again, drive those outcomes in ROI, we developed the playbook. It's really a framework to help our clients speak the language, as Peter alluded to in his section, the merchant language, really adhere to the PLR objectives, but also weave in the goals of your brand. And so what we offer through the playbook and the content that Databations provides is that intrinsic competitive lens that is missing in other sources. So visibility across retailers, which a merchant may not have at the level of detail that we were discussing today, and then across suppliers, right? How do you get visibility to your competitors, not only in the PLR retailer, but in the marketplace more broadly? Second, really breaking down prescriptive steps. So making sure that we're focused on the right areas. How are we telling a sequential story that, again, aligns with the merchant's perspective? And really where to start in terms of KPIs. Where the most meaningful, how do they translate into merchant recommendations and actions at the levels at which they make decisions, which is SKU geography. So with that, let's take a look at the platform or the model itself. So as we see the playbook, it's really, if you think about 5 steps that culminate in the 6th step, which is really putting together that narrative that we discussed. Step 1 is really the what. So we're going to think about what's going on in the category. Steps 2 through 5 are really about the why. So what are the levers and what are the factors that are affecting category performance overall? And then how do we distill that into the narrative? So a couple notes, what you'll see, we'll deep dive into each of these steps. We'll provide kind of the data that you're looking to use, the questions that you are looking to answer for yourself and for the merchant, and then an example of how we've used these processes with our clients to drive quantified and validated outcomes. Just a few notes as we go through. What you'll see are Databation's content. There's quite a few ways. Every PLR is different. Every category is different. This is really just a playbook, right? You could take pages from it for certain PLRs. You could use them all. It's really flexible, but it's designed to be that roadmap as you prepare for a PLR and really drive that narrative. And we won't cover an end-to-end PLR sequentially today. The goal is to really give you a flavor of each step. As you know, in a given PLR, some aspects of this model are going to be more interesting than others. So we're just going to give you a flavor of each analysis, knowing that we could go much deeper or there's different routes you could take. These are for illustration today. So with that, we're going to step into really getting lay of the land in this first step. So here, as I mentioned up front, we're really trying to get a sense of what's going on in the category broadly. Some of the data that we are interested in, cross-retailer market share data. We're looking for cross-brand market share. We're looking for geographic breakdown, so what's happening below the total US level. We're really looking to understand, again, which levers are driving the category. Is it assortment? Is it price? Is it inventory? Is it some combination of the three? And again, key questions here. What are the sales trends across the category overall, and then by retailer? How is our company as a supplier performing versus other manufacturers in terms of growth and share trends? And what are the drivers of the trend? Is it certain geographies? If there's variability by market? Is it certain subsegments or attributes of the category? And again, is it more linked to assortment, pricing, or out of stocks? These will start to give us a sense of how we might want to talk about the category to the merchant and then the role that we'll play ultimately. Let's step through some examples as we kind of break the funnel down. So think of this as a diagnostic. Again, this is from Databation's platform. Our goal here is really understand the category in total. And then, as I said, what levers are really in play. So if you look here at the top right, the category is down 4% year over year. And then there's a decomposition of what's happening with that volume. So it's broken on price here at the left. You can see volume, which is quantity here, new SKUs. So we're in innovation in the category, any discontinued SKUs, the impact of out of stocks. And then there's an other bucket here, which will encompass factors that we don't necessarily measure in the data. It could be things about positive weather impact, or it could be overall marketing dollars. So think of national budgets or things that aren't represented in the data sets. And again, as a diagnostic, what we can see here, category is down. The biggest levers here are the quantity. So there's an intrinsic decline in demand in the market overall for this particular category. And we're seeing that out of stocks are also a downward trend. Some prop up from innovation here, and again, other factors here. So what we can take away just from this first lens is categories down, it's not terribly healthy. And we can see that there's an intrinsic downfall in demand and there's pressures from out of stocks. So the next logical question is, if this is the total market, what does it look like at the retail level? So the retail level, no surprise, we can see here the red line down here is year over year sales by retailer. We knew that the category was down, so not a surprise that nobody is positive. What we can see though, is even in a shrinking pie, that Home Depot has gained about 200 basis points of share, really the expense of Lowe's predominantly, a little bit from Menards, but predominantly we can see that Lowe's, who will serve as our PLR retailer over the next few slides, is down a little over 9%. Right. So this is our focus here. Share loss, the sales are down. So we'll want to dig in a little bit further, understand who the players are, who's driving and who's draining. So this is a view by manufacturer for Lowe's. And we can see for the top 7 players or so, the red line again is their year over year revenue at Lowe's. And then the blue bars represent their contribution to the category sales at Lowe's. And so this view itself becomes one indicative of which players are driving and which players are draining the volume at Lowe's. But more importantly it's a matter of perspective. So depending on who you as a supplier are in this scenario will dictate, are you on the offensive in this PLR or are you on the defensive? And different players here would represent different perspectives. So here, the category leader in terms of share, down 9%, not great. Good news for them is that the next largest player is down worse. So as you start to think about your perspective, if you're the category leader here, you might start to focus your attention on what is not going well for competitor number 2, competitor number 3, probably a little bit more on the offensive. They're still down year over year. However, comparable share to the next player up and much better comps. So the trend continues. Interesting perspectives. This is a small player, but growing quite a bit. They would have a case potentially to make to the merchant for more space. So important here to think about, again, your perspective, what you're hoping to accomplish, how the merchant may be thinking about you and your competitors, and how your competitors are thinking about you. What moves might they make? So you quickly get a landscape of who the players are, and then you start to inform what your position may be. So now we have lay of the land. We understood that the category was down. We saw retailer by retailer who was gaining and losing share, what their sales performance was, and we're able to dig into the supplier level. So our attention now turns to assortment. We really believe that assortment is the critical piece of any PLR. Every block here, don't get me wrong, plays a role. However, assortment really is the culmination of the items in the stores for the retailers and consumer, be it a DIY or a pro consumer. This is a curation of those items to drive the business. So required data that we're thinking about: SKU level sales data for your own items, SKU level sales data for your competitors' items, attribute trends. So what are the properties of all the items on the shelf? And then any assortment gaps and differences that we may see across retailers. So if you think about the assortment in totality, do you see kind of white spaces in terms of where features or subsegments aren't represented equally across retailers? So again, we're looking at attributes, we're looking at geos, we're looking at how the retailer's assortment does compare. And I think importantly, and Peter touched on this in his section, really that objectivity. So an assessment of your own items as well as your competitors, because I don't think any merchant's expectation is that every item is going to be a winner for every brand. That's just not going to happen. So how do you really take the chair of a strategic advisor, take a hard look at your own assortment, but also think about your competitors? And so you're starting to put together this comprehensive picture that truly is in the best interests of the merchant and the best interests of the category. Let's take a look at some examples here. So we touch on attributes. Again, there's a multitude of ways you could take any analysis. You could look at subsegments first, but in this case, just for illustration, we're going to look at finish as an attribute of this particular category, which is shower heads. And what we're really looking to glean here is which features are important. We would have already done an analysis that would indicate that finish is an important driver of sales. So let's assume that we've already done that. And now we're really looking at this picture. And what we can see quickly, if we go to Lowe's first, this is contribution by attribute to the retailer sales over time, sequential quarters here. And what we can see in Lowe's, one, nickel makes up a disproportionate part of their assortment in terms of the volume that it drives compared to Depot or Lowe's. We're approaching 46% at Lowe's, and Menards and Depot are both in the mid to high 30s. We can also see that the nickel composition at Home Depot is starting to pick up. So we don't know for sure of the nickel being overrepresented here. That might be the right thing for their customers. It will remain to be seen, but we'll look at Home Depot as well. And we see that they're starting to take more interest in nickel and growing that share. So a couple takeaways here from attributes. Again, we could look at a number of attributes. For illustration, we're looking at this one. And so the next really level of the funnel is to start to look at item levels. So if we look at item levels, again, through the database's data, we can see SKU level. We can see the retailers here. We can see kind of the price buckets, which we'll talk more about later. And then we can see the productivities of these items. And what we're looking for, knowing that nickel is important in the category and knowing that Depot is taking share and taking a more vested interest in nickel, what items exactly are we looking at Depot that may be relevant to Lowe's assortments? We think about the PLR. So we could see the attributes of these items. We can make sure that either we as the supplier or Lowe's has comparable items at the shelf, because these are clearly growing year over year and have customer interest. So again, the SKU level, and again, we talk about the funnel of what's going on in the category, what's going on in attributes, and what are the SKUs that are driving these trends. This is how we get there. And so again, as we go, we're kind of taking notes on interesting items, interesting attributes that will make their way into our final story to the merchant. So an example that one of our clients used, really going deep on attributes, was a leading fan manufacturer. Their situation was they were looking to add new items through a Lowe's assortment PLR, really looking for a data-driven message for the merchant that would give them the opportunity to work in more items to the assortment. And what they found was looking at the fan assortment at Home Depot, they saw this app remote segment. And so think of this as kind of smart home technology where there's an app on your phone, you can control the fan that way. It was making up 8.5% of Home Depot sales and growing at 10% year over year. However, Lowe's had no presence in that particular subsegment. And so this was an opportunity for our client who did have this technology to present the items to the Lowe's merchant, work those items into the assortment, and gain $4 to $5 million in additional retail sales annually just through this attribution analysis and making the recommendation to the merchant. We also touched on geography a little bit. One of our clients, leading manufacturer in roofing, was able to break through at Home Depot really through a more geographic approach. So again, it varies by category. Oftentimes we'll see regional differences in the data in terms of finishes. In this case, it was more about materials and colors that map back to certain regions of the country. And so this manufacturer was able to really curate items and assortments on a regional basis based on what we're seeing in terms of the trends of the attributes that would be accretive to the category. For them, really yielded being able to defend their items that were already in distribution to the tune of 70 million of existing business. They protected 95% of their SKUs, but importantly also gained distribution for a subset of existing items, another 130 stores. So we're able to defend their business, but then add on additional revenue just through this attribution analysis. So we have the assortment set. We have some insight that we're taking away. We have a sense of where the category is going from attribution and kind of subsegment view. It could be geographically as well, as we touched on. So our attention turns to pricing. As somebody who spent many years in pricing is a very complex animal. What we're looking to do here is just really get a high level sense of what's going on in pricing, knowing that there will be more discussions to be had between the supplier and the merchants at the item level with deeper financials. But here, trying to get a sense of SKU level, ASP here is average selling price, data by retailer and brand. We're looking for sales contribution by kind of price tier and price bucket, and any other price benchmarks we may have, median, max price, min price that we see across stores, just to understand the range of prices that are out there in the market. Some of the questions that we're looking to answer: how do the average selling prices compare among the retailers? And then by subcategory or manufacturer and brand, how do some of the supplier prices compare even when it's not the common SKU? So if we're looking across retailers, how do we start to line up comparable items based on attribution, even if they're different brands and item numbers? Are they priced similarly based on features? We've done some work with our clients around price elasticities. So as we think about price changes, how do we focus on items that are going to be more resilient to price changes, and then items that are going to be more sensitive as part of our pricing strategy and recommendation? And then finally, and importantly, we'll show an example here in a moment, what volume is sold by price bucket. So are we getting a sense of comparability across retailers in terms of where that volume is falling on the value spectrum? So a great example from one of our clients, this is in the flooring category. They were looking to, of course, gain more space, flooring, and they're really trying to hone in on the distribution of the volume across, again, the value continuum. So down here, you can kind of see the price buckets from left to right. They go from lowest to higher. In Q3 2024, you could see distribution of the prices was very much towards the right side. So a little bit at the higher end, a lot of the volume was occurring. Fast forward a year to 2025, our client could see that quite a bit of volume had shifted at Lowe's into the $1.50 to $1.99. So more in the middle part of the curve. And so Lowe's had really stepped in and owned that particular part of the continuum, which created an opportunity for our client to approach Home Depot, share this information, show them that they weren't getting their fair share of this very large and growing segment of the price continuum, and make recommendations to Home Depot to go get their fair share, which equated to about $20 million in retail sales potentially per year. So closely related to pricing is promotion. Again, promotion has many facets, a lot of discussions between retailers and suppliers around promotion. Promotion can encompass true item promotions at various stores throughout the year, but for suppliers can also be reflective of national dollars that are spent or digital dollars or impressions that are pushed to various geographies. So through this data, we can see the lifts and the efficacy of some of these efforts. Really depends on the promotional plan data that you have available and what you're looking to accomplish, whether it's proving out the value of your own investments in the business. It could be for certain SKUs or brands. It could be co-marketing dollars that you may have with the retailer to understand, again, what kind of lifts they're providing for the category. Is it accretive to the category? Is it just shifting money around? And then also interesting, of course, through the competitive lens is how are your competitors using promotion to drive the business and engage the retailers? Are there brands that are heavily reliant on promotions, whereas maybe you're more reliant on everyday shelf price? And again, we touched on the concept of elasticity in the pricing section. Same is true here as well. Some items are going to respond better to promotions just based on their relative promotional elasticities. How do we make sure that we focus our investment dollars on the items that will drive incremental value and, again, be accretive to the category from a merchant perspective? As much as we want to focus on things that are going well for promotions, I think sometimes just given the scarcity and productivity of these marketing dollars, also helpful at times to understand what's not working. And so in this case, our client had run a promotion for an aerosol product, really promoted this 14-ounce SKU. The depth of discount was about 8%. And what we ultimately found with our client was that that promotion was ineffective. And given the kind of anniversary nature of promotions between retailers and suppliers at times, healthy to go back and kind of cull the ones that are not working. In this case, this was one of those where actually the brand lost $330,000 worth of sales. And really a lot of that money went to their competitor. So they were not able to grow the category, were not able to really even protect their own brand. Lots of factors that could be in play. It could be the relative inelasticity of this particular item. It could be high brand loyalty for their competitors. Hard to say in this particular case. It would require kind of deeper dives. But the agreement, interesting insight, promotion wasn't accretive to the merchant, wasn't helpful for the brand. So easy to discontinue this and reinvest the dollars in a promotion that was forecasted to do better on both sides of the coin. So we've discussed assortment, pricing, promotion. Last kind of block here is inventory. And what we're thinking about inventory really is all about efficiency. We're thinking about out-of-stock rates by brand and geography, thinking about calculated value of any lost sales as a result of out-of-stocks. And we're thinking about supply on hand or weeks on hand, again, by brand and geography. And what we're looking for, specific SKUs that may be driving out of stock for ourselves as a supplier, but also our competitors. Are the geographies that consistently have out of stock or weeks of supply issues? Who are the primary suppliers that are having difficulty? How do these metrics compare across retailers and brands? So do we see variation in terms of supply chain issues? Is it consistent for a category or a manufacturer or a retailer, or is there variability there? And how do these levels compare across, again, brands, retailers, manufacturers, geographies, to try to get a benchmark of maybe where things are going well and are super efficient and where they're not. And I think a goal, we've talked about the competitive lens. I think a goal here too is really evaluating where might you be able to catch a competitor on their back foot or maybe in the thick of some struggles, because that can create opportunity too, as it did for one of our clients using this type of information. So in this case, we're in the installation category. Our client believed that one of their competitors was having supply chain issues, either through the grapevine or conversations with a merchant. They wanted to validate that this was the case using databases. We were, in fact, able to quantify the out of stocks and that we had seen supply chain start to bite the retailer in terms of lost sales. Our client was able to use this information, approach the merchant, indicating that they both have the inventory and the right spec to replace these items until the supply chain straightened itself out for the competitor. They were able to stem future lost sales for the retailer, which obviously creates an opportunity for the supplier in terms of moving units, but also goodwill with the merchant to be accretive to their business to kind of protect the downside, which paves the way for more interesting conversations and future PLRs. Again, positioning yourself as that strategic advisor and looking out on behalf of your merchants to grow their business. $660,000 in terms of incremental retail revenue, which really equates to, for the retailer, downside protection of what would have been lost at the shelf. So at this stage, we've captured the what in the category and supplier performance. For assortment, price, promotion, inventory, really the why. So we've kind of captured our notes and the interesting takeaways at each step. We're starting to see these puzzle pieces that are not necessarily in order yet. And our goal in this step is really to develop that very streamlined very merchant-centric, clear vision of what you found and the recommendations that you'll make. And again, we think of it as a funnel. So the storyline really goes, how is the retailer performing versus the competitors? What is it looking like in terms of sales, market share? For subsegments, what are the drivers? Again, we saw the distribution or the decomposition rather of what was driving those sales. Was it intrinsic demand? Was it pricing, assortment, inventory? So we have a clear picture of what's going on there. Which manufacturers, the drivers or drainers? Again, it goes back to your relative position. Are you playing offense? Are you playing defense? You want to really script your story to what you know the merchant will know about your business. And so being objective and upfront about where you're doing well and where you're not, and where your competitors are doing well and where they're not, starting to target your story versus those areas. How can your brand uniquely help them win? So again, we know the goals of the PLR are going to be to grow retailer strategy in dollars. What do you bring to the table that your competitors can't? I think a really important piece here is making sure that we complete the story. So what are your recommendations and quantifying the impact? So the merchant has a multitude of voices in their ear during PLR season. They're trying to make sense of it all and what is the best path forward. I think being prescriptive about what you think it is based on the data and what you've seen and what you think your company can bring is critical to really crystallize that. It's not to say that the merchant's going to agree with everything. There won't be discussion. There will. However, you've kind of really created a picture and a line in the sand, all steeped in fact, that you can have a constructive conversation around. And then I think being specific about the actions that are needed from the merchant. How do you help them really take those first steps? Because again, they now have a deluge of information from X number of suppliers. They're trying to put their storyline together. So giving them a sense of what to do first, what's critical, what's not, can be super helpful. So as you think about the process, I would love to say you've seen here, we've displayed instances where we've partnered with clients using these steps with the information that we provide, SKU store level, and you've seen some fantastic outcomes with significant dollars attached to them. I would love to tell you that using this process and these steps will make every PLR a perfect win. I can't say that. What I can say though, is based on the interactions we've had with our clients, there's kind of 3 tiers of benefit. The first is really increasing their confidence as they approach these discussions. Anybody who's gone into a PLR not feeling confident about their story or not knowing exactly what the merchant's going to come back with, that's a tough spot to be in. What we've heard from our clients is as they bring Databations data and they integrate it into their storyline, they can walk into these conversations really confident about the story they're about to tell and being able to back it up with the data. So confidence is hard to quantify, but is important. I think next is the recognition that the merchants do give them. So as they walk in with these types of insights, or it's anchored to the merchant's goals and the PLR goals, they get credit for that. They get credit for really bringing a point of view, making it steeped in fact, tying it back to the objectives, and starting to position themselves as a strategic advisor and trusted partner, which is important in the long game. And I think finally, most important to everybody on the call is really the dollar outcome. So again, we've seen that. We want the decisions to go our way. The more it's steeped in fact, the higher the probabilities are that it could go our way if the story is well told, and again, in alignment with the merchant's goals. So while I can't say that, again, every PLR is going to turn out perfectly using our playbook, I can tell you for one of our clients, it was almost near perfect. So in this case, it was a surprise PLR, which I'm sure everybody appreciates those. And our client really, given the time crunch, needed additional support to prepare for that meeting. The stakes were high because they were really looking to expand their current position, protect it, but also target one of their key competitors' business at Home Depot. And what they were able to do really in partnership was start to think about the category from the merchant standpoint. So they know that the merchant wants to grow the category, grow share and revenue year over year. And they were able to tell a very comprehensive story about what they brought to the table in terms of their assortment. So down here, we can kind of see the client at Home Depot is really a parity to this competitor. But when we look broader in the marketplace, the story that our client was able to tell is that they had a bigger footprint in the market. They had more of a consumer following, and that by spreading out on their assortment and their items, they were able to draw volume from across the street at Lowe's into Depot because now they're competing on items that we know have legs in the market that would be, again, incremental to their category. Whereas for the competitor, Home Depot had clearly invested in them. but that brand was not resonating with the balance of the market. So therefore, that value proposition wasn't strong overall in terms of that competitor being a trusted advisor and supplier to Depot, because there was no incremental real volume to draw from as there was with our client. So they're able to tell a stem to stern story about the value that they offered, who they were as a partner, their durability in the marketplace, and were able to add 35 SKUs across the national footprint of Depot, which is about a 25% increase in the number of their placements, which equated to about $50 million in annualized revenue. So in the last few minutes, thrown quite a bit at you. We've talked about the building blocks and kind of the steps and the insights. And so to crystallize that a bit, we've prepared a checklist. Feel free to use the QR code here to download a PDF version, but really just a little bit of a rubric here to get you started, to share with your team as you begin to think about ways of working internally. And so in this final section, final few minutes, I just want to bring it all back together. So again, you've seen this quite a few times now, but to bring it with a close, that bottom layer there is really the what. What is happening? Where does the merchant stand versus their competitors? Where do you stand as a supplier versus yours? What's happening overall? And then we get into that middle section, which again is really the why. So this is the execution layer. These are where the bulk of the insights will come from as you start to craft your story, which is the outcome. So that clear merchant ready recommendation that you've quantified the impact, you've kind of thought through it from a merchant perspective. And these are the recommendations you're making for them to achieve their PLR objectives. That is the outcome. And so that's the culmination of all the work that you will have done up to this point, really in that streamlined story, being prescriptive and helping the merchant make sense of what's going on in the category. And really doubling down on what Peter had said up front, but we'll close with it as well. The new language of line reviews is data-based. They're looking for insights and guidance. So how do you provide that clarity and confidence in your own team of the preparation that goes in and you have a solid story, but also confidence that the merchant will have in you as you bring those stories to them, that it is narrative driven, right? Again, everybody responds well to stories. So they see the sequential builds of what you found and what you think you should do about it and the actions to take versus working from the bottom up. The world does ultimately for assortment revolve around SKU, but telling the story, again, top down is the criticality. Making sure that the recommendations are tied to their retailer strategy. So if their goals are share or revenue or profitability, how are your recommendations tied back to that? So it's a one-to-one match. And then you are focused on their outcomes, not just your own performance. How do they grow? How do they gain share from their competitors? And really earning that seat at the table as a strategic advisor is connecting the broader trends to very specific SKU insights. So as granular as you can make it and your retailer can execute. Are there geographic differences? How are you thinking about attributes? Those types of things. You're quantifying the opportunity and thinking through the trade-offs, right? If they take on a new item of yours, what do they get rid of? And again, that objectivity of if you have low performers, those are in the mix. If truly your competitors are the weak link, you're targeting them. You're leading with that retailer-centric POV. So again, always with the merchant first. And you're showing partnership. So it's not just the product. Make it easy for the merchant to make decisions. Again, you've kind of game planned the puts and takes, and you are thinking about what's best for them and how they explain their decisions to their leadership. That goes a long way. So on behalf of Peter, on behalf of Ashley, myself, the entire Databations team, we appreciate the time you invested today. We would love to help you prepare for your next PLR, to answer any questions that you may have coming out of this webinar. Feel free to scan the QR code here to set up a time to meet with one of our team members, or feel free to email sales@databations.ai with any questions, or again, to reach out and connect. So again, we appreciate the time you've invested. Hope you're able to use this, reach out with any questions, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.